The neon lights of the Riverside Plaza Hotel flickered against the dark November sky as Staff Sergeant Marcus Reynolds pulled his rental sedan into the parking lot. It was 11:47 p.m. on a cold Friday night, and the two-story budget hotel sat at the edge of the city's business district. After 14 months deployed in Afghanistan, all he wanted was to surprise his wife, Jennifer, and wrap his arms around her again. He wasn't supposed to be home for another 5 weeks. The early return was meant to be his gift to her. Their 12th anniversary was just days away. In his carry-on bag, alongside his combat uniform and military ID, lay a platinum bracelet he'd ordered specially from a jeweler in Dubai. The Uber driver, a young woman named Monica, helped him retrieve his bags from the trunk. "Welcome home, soldier," she said warmly. "Your wife must be thrilled you're back early." Marcus smiled, imagining Jennifer's face when she'd see him at their apartment. "She doesn't know I'm coming, wanted to surprise her," he replied. Monica nodded, wished him well, and drove off into the night. Marcus stood for a moment in the hotel parking lot, confused. He'd tried calling Jennifer 3 times from the airport. No answer. He'd sent texts, all unread. Their apartment was only 15 minutes away, but something had drawn him here. Earlier that evening, while waiting at baggage claim, he'd received a notification from their shared credit card. A charge at the Riverside Plaza Hotel. Room 219. $189 for one night. His stomach had dropped. Jennifer worked as an office manager at Henderson & Associates law firm downtown. Her boss, Richard Henderson, was a 42-year-old divorced attorney with a reputation. Marcus had met him twice at company holiday parties. Each time, Richard's eyes had lingered on Jennifer a little too long, his hand resting on her lower back a moment too long during group photos. The hotel lobby smelled of cheap air freshener and stale coffee. A tired-looking clerk barely looked up as Marcus walked past the front desk toward the stairs. His military boots made soft thuds on the carpeted steps as he climbed to the second floor. Room 219 was at the end of a dimly lit hallway. He stood outside the door for what felt like an eternity, his heart pounding against his ribs. He could hear muffled sounds from inside, low music, a television, then laughter, Jennifer's laugh, the one she used to reserve only for him. His training kicked in. Moving quietly, he tested the door handle. Unlocked. Hotels required key cards, but someone had propped the latch. As he eased the door open, the scene before him burned itself into his memory in jagged pieces. The room was dimly lit by a bedside lamp. Champagne bottles sat on the nightstand next to 2 empty glasses. Jennifer's red coat, the one he'd bought her last Christmas, was draped over a chair. Her heels lay scattered on the floor. And there on the bed, tangled sheets, pale skin against darker skin, his wife's legs wrapped around a man in an expensive suit with his tie loosened around his neck. Time fractured. Nobody moved. Then Jennifer screamed. Richard Henderson, silver-haired with a gym-toned body, rolled off and scrambled for something on the nightstand. In the yellow lamplight, metal glinted, a folding knife, sleek and black with a 3-inch blade. If you're still watching, let us know in the comments section. Subscribe and share with loved ones. Marcus's training took over. In Afghanistan, hesitation meant death. He crossed the room in 3 strides, caught Richard's wrist before he could fully open the blade, and drove his knee into the man's ribs. The knife clattered to the floor. What happened next unfolded like a nightmare in slow motion. Jennifer screaming, Richard gasping for air but fighting back, fists connecting with flesh, bodies slamming against furniture. The knife slid under the bed. Blood sprayed across cream-colored walls. In the chaos, Marcus's hand found the knife. Richard lunged again. The blade flashed once, twice, and then silence. Jennifer Reynolds stood in front of her bathroom mirror 6 hours earlier, carefully applying her MAC Ruby Woo lipstick. At 34, she still caught admiring glances at the office. Her Pilates routine kept her body toned, and she took pride in looking polished. Today, she'd chosen a fitted black dress that showed just enough to be professional, yet alluring. Her phone buzzed on the marble counter. A text from Richard. Booked the usual place. Can't stop thinking about you. Marcus still wasn't due back for 5 more weeks. She typed back quickly. See you at 8. Can't wait. Jennifer stared at her reflection, trying to silence the guilt gnawing at her conscience. She and Marcus had been college sweethearts, married right after she graduated with her business degree. He joined the military to provide stability for their future, and she'd supported his decision. But the deployments grew longer, the loneliness deeper, and somewhere along the way, she'd started feeling invisible. Richard Henderson had entered her life 8 months ago when she was promoted to office manager at his law firm. He was everything Marcus wasn't. Polished, present, wealthy in a way that made life seem effortless. What started as working late on cases turned into dinners after hours, then secret hotel meetings, and finally something she couldn't control. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Marcus on a video call. "Hey, beautiful," he said, his face pixelated on the small screen. He looked exhausted, dust from the Afghan desert still visible on his uniform collar. "Hey," she answered, forcing brightness into her voice. "How are you?" "Missing you like crazy. 5 more weeks feels like forever, but our anniversary is coming up. Got something special planned." "Can't wait," she lied, her stomach twisting into knots. They talked for a few minutes about surface-level things. She mentioned a big case at the firm, carefully avoiding any mention of Richard, who'd become far more than her boss. "I love you," Marcus said before hanging up. "Stay safe over there." "Love you too," she replied, the words tasting like ashes in her mouth. At the office that afternoon, her coworker Diane noticed her distraction. "Girl, you're playing a dangerous game," Diane warned while refilling her coffee. "Richard might have money and charm, but he's got an ex-wife who could write a book about his cheating. And Marcus, that man loves you for real." I know," Jennifer said, organizing files at her desk. "It just happened. And now I'm in too deep." "You're going to destroy everything," Diane muttered. "Mark my words." By evening, Jennifer had pushed away all thoughts of consequences. She'd texted Marcus a sweet message about missing him, letting him believe she'd be home watching Netflix alone. She'd packed an overnight bag with a change of clothes and her favorite perfume. She'd even bought new lingerie specifically for tonight. At 8:15 p.m., Richard's black Mercedes pulled up to the hotel's side entrance. He'd already checked in under a fake name, something they'd done a dozen times before. He entered the room looking like temptation itself in a tailored navy suit and crisp white shirt. "God, you look incredible," he said, pulling her close. "I've been thinking about this all week." They barely made it to the bed before hands started exploring. Richard had brought expensive champagne and Belgian chocolates. They drank, laughed, made love, talked about fantasies of running away together, and made love again. Hours passed in a bubble of stolen pleasure and reckless abandon. "When are you going to leave him?" Richard asked around 11:30, tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "We could be together for real. I'd take care of you." "It's complicated," she answered, though lately it felt less complicated. "The apartment lease, our finances. Everything's tied together." "I have resources," Richard said, meaning his considerable wealth from his law practice. "Just say the word." "Give me time," she said, kissing him to avoid further discussion. Neither of them heard the rental car pull into the parking lot. Neither noticed the military boots climbing the stairs. They were lost in each other, the TV playing low in the background, when the hotel room door swung open and their world exploded. Blood pooled on the beige carpet, seeping into the fibers. One body lay motionless near the bathroom. Richard Henderson, face down, multiple stab wounds across his back and neck. Jennifer sat against the wall by the window, her hands pressed against a deep gash on her left forearm, collateral damage from trying to pull Marcus away. Marcus stood in the center of the room, the knife still gripped in his hand. His military training had taken over during the fight, precise and lethal. but now the soldier was fading, leaving just a man staring at the destruction of everything he'd known. He checked Richard first, no pulse, eyes vacant, then moved to Jennifer, who was conscious but hyperventilating. "Marcus," she whispered, blood staining her black dress. "Please, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." His combat medic training kicked in. He grabbed towels from the bathroom, applied pressure to her wound. "Don't talk. Help is coming." But he hadn't called anyone yet. His phone was still in his bag by the door. Someone in the neighboring rooms must have heard the commotion, the screaming. Someone would call 911. As if on cue, police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. "I didn't mean for this." Jennifer tried to speak again, tears streaming down her face. "Stop," Marcus said quietly, his voice hollow. "Just stop talking." The sirens stopped in the parking lot below. Car doors slammed. Heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs. "Police, open the door." Marcus set the knife down carefully on the dresser and walked to the door. Hands raised. He opened it to find 5 officers with weapons drawn. "Don't move. Hands where we can see them." "I'm Staff Sergeant Marcus Reynolds," he said calmly, though his voice cracked. "I'm the victim's husband. There's 1 person dead, 1 injured. My wife needs medical attention." They cuffed him anyway. Standard procedure. As they led him past room 219's open door, he caught one last glimpse of Jennifer being attended to by paramedics, her face a mask of shock and regret. Downstairs, a crowd had gathered in the parking lot. Hotel guests filming with phones, employees whispering, news vans already pulling up. A middle-aged woman in a hotel uniform shook her head sadly. "That poor soldier," she murmured to her coworker. "Served his country and came home to this." The next hours passed in a fluorescent-lit blur. The detective interviewing Marcus at the station was a black woman in her 50s named Detective Patterson. "Walk me through it again," she said, the recording device on the metal table between them capturing every word. Marcus told it straight. The early return, the credit card notification, the hotel room, the knife, self-defense. His court-appointed attorney James Chen, a serious man in wire-rimmed glasses, interjected frequently. "My client is a decorated combat veteran who discovered his wife in a hotel room with her lover. The deceased pulled a weapon first." "A folding knife," Detective Patterson noted, "against an unarmed soldier." "My client didn't know what other weapons might be present," James argued. "He reacted to an immediate threat." Jennifer underwent emergency surgery for her arm wound. Her parents arrived from 2 hours away, her mother sobbing, her father grimacing in barely contained fury. They'd never fully accepted Marcus, always thought their daughter had settled by marrying a military man. Now they sat in the hospital waiting room, avoiding the news cameras gathering outside. By dawn, the story was everywhere. Soldier catches wife with boss in hotel, deadly stabbing at Riverside Plaza. Social media exploded with hot takes. He served his country while she was serving her boss. Team Marcus all the way. 2 wrongs don't make a right. He should be locked up for murder. She got what was coming to her. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, but none of it reached Marcus in his holding cell. He sat motionless on the concrete bench, staring at the cinder block wall, seeing only Jennifer's face. First on their wedding day, laughing in white lace, then in that hotel room, horror-stricken and blood-stained. When had it all gone wrong? Was it during his 2nd deployment? His 3rd? Had the signs been there all along, invisible to a man who trusted completely? 2 days later, Jennifer was released from the hospital with 17 stitches and a police escort. She was arrested immediately and charged as an accessory to Richard Henderson's actions, specifically aiding in the assault against Marcus by being present and failing to intervene when Richard grabbed the knife. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Lisa Morgan, held a press conference. This isn't just about infidelity. When Mr. Henderson armed himself with a knife in response to being discovered, Mrs. Reynolds had an opportunity to de-escalate. Instead, evidence shows she screamed at her husband, further inflaming the situation. She bears responsibility. Marcus's preliminary hearing came first. Given his military service, clean record, and the circumstances, walking in on his wife with another man who then armed himself, the judge granted bail at $50,000. Veterans organizations and his old Army unit raised the money within hours. The media circus intensified. Marcus's commanding officer from Afghanistan gave a statement. Sergeant Reynolds served 3 tours with distinction. He saved lives under fire. He's a hero being treated like a criminal. Jennifer's lawyer, a public defender named Robert Yamamoto, tried a different angle. My client is a victim of her husband's violence. She was exercising her right to have consensual relations, however morally questionable, and was nearly killed for it. The court of public opinion was less forgiving. Jennifer's social media was flooded with hate messages. Someone leaked her work emails, showing months of flirtatious exchanges with Richard, some sent while Marcus was under enemy fire overseas. The law firm where she worked issued a statement terminating her employment, effective immediately. 3 weeks after that terrible night, the investigation uncovered something darker. Richard Henderson's computer, seized by police, contained disturbing files, calendar entries detailing Marcus's deployment schedule, screenshots of Jennifer's text messages about military operations. Most damning, a life insurance policy on Marcus, taken out 6 months earlier, with Jennifer as the sole beneficiary. The policy was worth $750,000. Detective Patterson brought this evidence to the prosecutor's office on a gray December morning. We need to look at this again, she said, spreading printouts across the conference table. This wasn't just an affair. I think they were planning something. Further investigation revealed more. Richard had made discreet inquiries with a private investigator about accident scenarios for military personnel. His browser history showed searches for how to make a death look accidental in combat zones and hiring contractors in Afghanistan. The case against Jennifer evolved. New charges were filed: conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and first-degree attempted murder. The prosecutor's theory: Jennifer and Richard were having an affair but also plotting Marcus's death to collect insurance money and be together. When confronted with this evidence during interrogation, Jennifer initially denied everything. But when Detective Patterson played a recording recovered from Richard's phone, a voice memo where they discussed timing it during his next patrol, she broke down. It was Richard's idea, she sobbed in the interrogation room, her attorney beside her looking grim. He said Marcus would never let me go. He said we needed a permanent solution. I never really thought we'd go through with it. But you didn't stop it, Detective Patterson said quietly. You gave him deployment schedules. You took out the insurance policy. Marcus watched the interrogation video in the prosecutor's office, his face like carved stone. His attorney sat beside him, occasionally glancing at his client with concern. This changes everything, Lisa Morgan said when the video ended. Your case for self-defense just got a lot stronger. They were actively planning to murder you. Marcus said nothing. He just kept staring at the frozen image on the screen. Jennifer's tear-streaked face, still beautiful even in her confession, still the woman he'd loved more than anything. The trial began on a cold morning in February. The courthouse steps were packed with protesters, some supporting Marcus, others holding signs about domestic violence and military culture. News vans lined the street. Inside, the prosecution laid out their case methodically. They presented the insurance policy, the browser searches, the voice recordings. Richard's secretary testified that he'd asked her to research accidental death benefits for military spouses. Jennifer's co-worker Diane took the stand, recounting conversations where Jennifer complained about being trapped in her marriage. The defense tried to paint Jennifer as manipulated by Richard, a powerful attorney who'd taken advantage of a lonely wife. But the recordings told a different story. In one particularly damaging audio file, Jennifer's voice was clear. The insurance doesn't pay out for suicide. It has to look like enemy action or an accident during operations. Marcus testified on his own behalf, his voice steady despite the emotion crackling beneath. "I loved her," he said simply. "I would have died for her. I almost did, in Afghanistan, more times than I can count. And the whole time, she was back here planning exactly that." The most devastating moment came when the prosecutor played the final voice memo from Richard's phone, recorded just hours before Marcus came home early. Jennifer's voice. "5 more weeks. After that, we're set for life. He'll never know what hit him." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Verdict on Marcus's charges. Not guilty on all counts. Self-defense was deemed justified given the knife, the threatening circumstances, and the newly discovered murder plot. Jennifer's verdict came 2 weeks later in a separate trial. Guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and attempted murder. The judge, a stern woman named Justice Helen Torres, showed no leniency at sentencing. "Mrs. Reynolds, you betrayed not just your marriage vows, but the sanctity of trust that military families depend on. While your husband risked his life serving this country, you plotted his death for financial gain. This court sentences you to 30 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. Jennifer's sobs echoed through the courtroom as she was led away in handcuffs. Her parents left without speaking to anyone, their faces portraits of grief and shame. The aftermath rippled through the city. Henderson and Associates law firm closed its doors permanently, unable to recover from the scandal. Richard's ex-wife gave interviews about his pattern of manipulation and infidelity. The Riverside Plaza Hotel underwent rebranding, trying to distance itself from the tragedy. Marcus resigned from the military, accepting an honorable discharge with full benefits and medals. He started intensive therapy at the VA, working through trauma that went far beyond combat. Eventually, he began speaking to veterans groups about betrayal, trust, and survival. The hotel room where it happened was completely renovated. New carpet, new furniture, even a new room number. But some stains go deeper than what cleaning crews can reach. 1 year later, Marcus sat in his new apartment across town, staring at finalized divorce papers. His hand hovered over the signature line as memories flickered through his mind like an old film. High school football games, their wedding reception, video calls from Kabul, her laugh, her lies. His phone buzzed. A text from his VA counselor. "Group session tonight at 7. You planning to come?" He signed the papers with a firm stroke. Outside, the city continued its relentless rhythm. Buildings rose and fell. People fell in love, betrayed each other, healed, and tried again. But in certain quiet moments in the spaces between heartbeats, the echoes remained. The hotel room door opening, the knife flashing in lamplight, the soldier who came home early, the wife who plotted too late. As years passed, Marcus's life slowly began to resemble something whole again. Fragile and reconstructed, but whole nonetheless. The weight of betrayal still lingered, a scar that would never fully fade. Each small victory in his recovery felt muted, filtered through the lens of what he'd lost and what he'd survived. There were nights when he'd sit alone on his balcony, watching the city lights, wondering about the parallel life he'd never get to live. The one where Jennifer was faithful, where Richard Henderson was just a boss, where his early homecoming meant surprise and joy instead of blood and sirens. But life moves forward, with or without permission. He spent months in therapy, learning to breathe through the panic attacks, learning to trust again, or at least learning that not trusting was okay too. He didn't need to forget the betrayal, he just needed to stop letting it define every sunrise. One evening, as Marcus sat reviewing notes for an upcoming talk, he received a call from the Veterans Center. They wanted him to speak at a national conference about post-combat trauma and personal betrayal. The wounds that don't come from bullets. He hesitated, his finger hovering over the decline button. Then he remembered something his therapist had said. "Your story isn't just about what was done to you. It's about what you did with it afterward." He accepted. 3 months later, Marcus stood before an auditorium of 300 veterans and their families. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the podium, but his voice was steady. "I've been to hell and back," he began, "and sometimes hell isn't a firefight in Kandahar. Sometimes it's walking into a hotel room and watching your entire life disintegrate in seconds. Sometimes the enemy isn't carrying an AK-47. Sometimes she's wearing your wedding ring." The room was silent except for a few muffled sobs. "I'm not going to stand here and tell you betrayal doesn't break you, because it does. I'm not going to say forgiveness comes easy, because it doesn't. What I will tell you is this: you are not the sum of someone else's choices. You are not defined by their lies, their betrayal, their weakness." His voice cracked slightly, but he pushed through. "I am more than what she did to me. And I promise you, every single one of you carrying wounds that nobody can see, you are more too. We survive, we rebuild, and somehow, impossibly, we find peace." As Marcus stepped down from the stage, several veterans approached him. Handshakes, hugs, shared stories of their own betrayals and survivals. One older man, a Vietnam vet with tears in his eyes, simply said, "Thank you for making it okay to still be broken." That night, alone in his apartment, Marcus opened a box he'd kept sealed for over a year. Inside was the platinum bracelet from Dubai, still in its velvet box, never given. He held it for a long moment, then placed it back in the box and put it in his closet. Not thrown away, not forgotten, just no longer the center of everything. His phone buzzed with messages from people who'd watched the speech online. His mother sent 3 heart emojis. His old unit commander sent a simple text. "Proud of you, brother." Marcus looked at his reflection in the darkened window. The man staring back looked older, harder, but also somehow lighter. The weight was still there. Betrayal doesn't just vanish, but it wasn't crushing him anymore. He could breathe, he could smile. He could imagine a future that didn't revolve around what happened in room 219. If you've been touched by Marcus's story, or if you found a part of yourself in his journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because healing starts with acknowledgement, and together we can turn our deepest wounds into wisdom that helps others survive their darkest hours.